Please excuse the clickbait title. I know what I was doing there, and for sure it's clickbaity. When I'm saying the worst, I mean like in the millennial sense of saying like, oh, this thing is the worst. Like you're sort of rolling your eyes in frustration, right? So of course, Footprints is an amazing tune with unbelievable performances that I want to talk about today. So let's get into greater detail today with the essential bass line to Footprints. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rubicki. I'm glad that you're here. We are talking about this tune Footprints today, not the worst, only in a hyperbolic sense of frustration, and we'll find out why in just a minute. So Footprints is a Wayne Shorter composition, and it first appears on his album called Adam's Apple. Reggie Workman is playing bass on that. And then Wayne also records it with Miles Davis, same year in fact, on Miles's album called Miles Smiles. Ron Carter is playing bass on that. And there's a couple of subtle differences that are presented in these performances that we'll talk about. The line itself is not super complicated, and it is definitely an essential line as far as I'm concerned that all jazz bass players should know how to play. And it's a C minor blues. The tune is basically a C minor blues, and it starts with a pickup. Now, as we get into talking about rhythm, first comes our sort of first frustration, which is how do you actually count this? It is definitely a triple meter. It's definitely in some kind of 3 or 6. You could say it's 3/4. You could also say it's 6/4. I go with 6/4 partially because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm just doing this off the top of my head, there's a version of Wayne's own hand of the song, it's his composition, and he writes it in 6. So I'm thinking of it in 6/4. The legal real book also has it in 6/4. So let's just call it in 6. Some people say it's in 3. If you say it's in 3/4, where the chords occur and what the melody does, how you would notate the melody is twice as long. So that adds an element of sort of confusion we won't get into. We're going to stay in 6/4. So let's get into these first sort of 4 bars. As I say, it starts with a pickup. The pickup is a G and it goes to C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1, like that, and 1. As we get into playing the line a little more, we'll quickly see that there's a better way to finger it. I'm gonna just sort of finger just the generic sort of this half first position area to get started, because that's sort of partially where we're all probably most comfortable and feel most at home, right? So as I said, this starts with a pickup that is a G going to C. G, C, G, C. G, C, G, C, and now we're going to E flat above this higher C. G, C, G, C, E flat. A little bit out of tune there. And you'll notice as I'm fingering it here, I'm sort of using what is sort of an amalgam or an approximation of what we might get from the Simandl method as far as where we're placing these notes. And we're going to look at a different place to put them in just a minute. But let's just get that into our hands, right? Not super complicated. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 1, 2, 3. Those are the first 4 bars. That's it. G, C, G, C, E flat. That's all. So as I said, there's an easier way to finger this. There's a couple choices, in fact. Ron Carter, who plays, as I say, on the Miles Davis album, very cleverly, very smartly, and very efficiently plays it here, plays everything here. G here with the 4th finger, C on the E string here with the 1st finger. G, C, G, and then the C is right under our pinky on the D string, C, and then the E flat is right there with our 1st finger. We don't have to shift at all. This shift from this C down here on the G string, moving to this E flat on the E string, can be a bit of a harrowing sort of moment, right? As far as, again, talk about hyperbole, it's not harrowing, but we can miss that note. It's easier to miss that note when we have to shift, especially in this minor 3rd interval. So if we play it all here, G, C, G, C, no shifting at all. G, C, G, C. Very clever, right? How Ron fingers this, and it makes complete sense. Now, you may see me play this either now in this video or some other time, fingering it a slightly different way. And that's because I am making a choice based on the setup of the particular bass that I'm playing. We've got my Shen here today with this Shen hybrid. It's a new bass for me, and I'm still learning it and still getting the strings that I want to match with it and so on. So it's still sort of a work in progress. And I'm noticing as I'm playing this, that playing this here, G, C, it sounds okay, but it's not really sort of open. It sounds sort of closed to me, as opposed to, right? That's a much more sort of resonant sound as opposed to, it's there, but it's not as sort of, it's not as bright, it's not as alive, it's not as open. So there's more breath here, right? But then I have this awkward leap that I was talking about. So what I'm gonna do is combine the ideas into what I think is the best choice for this particular bass. I play open G, play the C with my first finger, open G again, and then use this tool that we all talk about, using open strings to be able to make a shift. So open G, C, open G, shift to the C here. So this interval, the minor third, 4 with a pinky, 1 with the first finger, isn't as dangerous a shift at all because I'm not actually shifting, right? I've made the shift to C. I feel comfortable where this C is. And then use the G again to get back down to this G, C. Open G shift. To me, that's the best combination on this particular bass of if I'm worried about making that intervallic leap from this C to this E flat. Another idea here though is I'm also noticing that it sounds really, really good if I actually play the G closed on this particular bass with these particular strings on this particular day. It's sounding, that sounds pretty good. The tonal quality of the notes is more matched. Playing them so close, playing in this position allows for the notes to really be very close to each other. In other words, they're almost sounding together, like a double stop. I'm letting the G still ring. I'm leaving my finger down, letting the G still ring as I play the C, which is a very Ron Carter thing, by the way, leaving those notes really long and almost playing them into each other. So they're both ringing at the same time. Up. I could do that. I'm still figuring it out. As I say, I'm figuring out this bass, but I think the important thing, and hopefully the point of that you get from what I'm talking about, is that I'm making choices based on the instrument itself as to what fingerings I'm gonna play. Now, speaking of fingerings, as a little bit of an aside, making choices about that also has to do with what you yourself are confident in. If you are not confident as to where this C is on the D string, but you are confident as to where the E flat is, then think of this E flat as your anchor point, as your target, like physical target as you're moving your hand. So if I play open G, C, open G again, and now I'm not thinking, even though the note I'm playing next is C on the D string, I'm actually thinking in my mind visually on the fingerboard where the E flat is, because if I have proper hand position and I hit this E flat properly, this C is going to naturally be almost in tune, or should much closer to be in tune. So G, C, G, thinking E flat, I'm going to play C. I'm just using this as my reference point. If this octave D is your reference point, then you can sort of shift things up from there, like knowing that the E flat is only a half step up from the D. You can, I'm speaking sort of visually, you can say, okay, it's very close to this D, and that's gonna at least get you in the ballpark of what to aim for when you're practicing. If none of those apply, keep it in this position, in one position, if you can, and that also can be much more it can be much less tiresome because we're often playing this line over and over again, given your particular setup. I don't want to belabor the point, but point being, fingering choices can make a big difference as far as sound and longevity and stamina and so on and so forth. You all know this already. So we've talked about these first 4 bars. Let's talk about the second 4 bars and our second pain point of frustration. I say, again, frustration tongue-in-cheek. There's a change in the harmony going from the C minor to F minor, and it's kind of a C minor 11 to F minor 11. We'll talk about extensions another time. Let's just say C minor 7 to F minor 7. And we want to allude to that in the bass line, right? But there's this sense of what Wayne Shorter wrote that has a almost droning quality to it, which is really nice. And whoever made this exact decision as to what to play, as far as the bass part, I assume it was Wayne, but certainly the guys, Reggie and Ron Carter, had something to say about it, certainly added to the actual sound of what was happening. So it starts out the same, G, C, this is on F minor, he's still playing N, so the downbeat of the F minor is the C, but the next note is going to be the F, the root of the chord. And C, G, C, F. Now here's the pain point. On the original recording of Adam's Apple, the original song, the original version of Footprints, Reggie Workman plays a C next. Ron Carter often would play a B flat next. So he's sort of extending the idea of the F minor 11. He's actually, this B flat is the 11, or the 4th degree of an F minor scale. So Reggie Workman would play F, C, just like before, if we're playing it here, G, C, G, I'm sorry, G, C, F, C, E flat, G, C, F, C, E flat. But as I say, Ron, sometimes, not always, but he will play G, C, F, B flat, E flat. And you notice what's awkward there? We've got all this first finger stuff. And for my particular hands, the way my sort of joints work, I'm double jointed, it's really awkward for me to generally do fourths. And so that's just something to keep in mind. I know that it's awkward for other people too. So G, C, F, B flat, E flat. G, C, F, B flat, E flat. As opposed to G, C, F, C, E flat. That's a little easier, right? We're only doing one interval of a fourth and then playing the first and fourth finger here, the F to the C again, to the E flat again. So that lays a little bit easier. These are decisions that you're gonna have to make yourself when you're playing it. What do you wanna do? What does the music call for? And so on and so forth. Certainly putting that B flat in, G, C, F, B flat, this one here, that sound of fourths is sort of alludes in and of itself to a sort of more open thing. And it is also not normal for us as bass players to play the 4th degree as part of the sort of core bass line, right? Unless it's a sus chord. That's for another time. Nonetheless, so think about it. It's up to you. But know that these are two ways of doing it. So that's one point of frustration. There's no right way to do it. And for me, I can be kind of a rule follower, as you probably can tell just from sort of my personality. And I want there to be a right way. And that goes back to sort of a history of my pathology as a child, right? But nonetheless, so there's not a right way to do that. Knowing them both is important. Know them both. So putting those two sections together, first 4 measures and the next 2 measures, G, C, G, C, G, C. Now I'm going to play Reggie's way. I actually played 8 measures there. After it goes to the F minor, just like in a normal blues, it goes back to C minor 7, C minor 11, and we go back to that original line. Nothing super difficult. Your fingering of choice. You can mix it up if you're getting tired, if the song goes on forever, which it often does at jam sessions. And here comes the F minor. Ron. Okay, so now we're up to what's called the turnaround. And you've certainly probably have heard this word before. Generally, that refers to some kind of harmonic movement that is sort of setting up a return to the home sound of the song, where some tension has been built and then released into a resolution, so to speak. Often, the most basic sort of one we think about is a 5-1, like dominant 5 going to 1 major, or 2-5 going to 1. We've all heard about this. Here is the third and really sticky pain point of frustration. There's no right way to play it thing, part of this tune. Rather than any kind of sort of normal turnaround that we would have in a minor blues, Wayne plays or composes a gorgeous little sequence of chords. And I want to be clear that what I have on the PDF that is available for y'all is my very best grouping of listening a lot, reading a lot, listening to people I trust a lot as to what is sort of the best way to capture the intent of the composition, what was actually played on a couple different recordings, and the piano parts are also different, and what sort of is a logical sort of sequence. So we're talking about me collecting information to provide to you, but knowing, and I'm trying to communicate to you, these are not the end all be all. In fact, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do this. And we'll see that in the ways that Ron Carter specifically plays his bass line in this moment. So as far as the actual chords that we have in this, in bar 9, we've got an F sharp minor 9 flat 5. This is what you might call a half diminished chord with a natural 9. That would be spelled, in this instance, F sharp, A is the natural 3rd, C is a flat 5, and then it's just a regular flat 7, so E, okay? And then we've got the 9, which is the 2nd degree of the scale. That, in this instance, would be G sharp. F sharp, A, C natural, E natural, G sharp. Yeah, so the fact that it's very clearly played as a natural 9 as opposed to a flat 9 there is important, an important part of the sound. We really, of course, need to pay attention to the fact that it is an F sharp half diminished. The natural 9 isn't quite as important to us, but knowing that that is F sharp, A, C, E is important there. The next chord is an F13 sharp 11. Sounds fancy, and it kind of is, but the basic idea is just that it's an F dominant chord, an F7. Let's review that real quick. F. Natural 3 is A natural. A 5th, natural 5th is C. And the flat 7 is E flat. A natural 7 would be E natural. We're speaking of everything in relation to the key of the root of the chord of the moment. So we're talking about everything in relation to F major, an F major scale right here in this particular chord. 1, 3, 5, flat 7, okay? So that is the core element of what we need to know about that. F sharp half diminished, F7. The next thing is an E dominant chord as well, but it's got a flat 5. This is a little bit unusual, stuff we haven't really discussed much in other videos in the past. That is going to be spelled like a dominant chord, but the 5 is going to be down a half step. It's going to be flatted. So an E dominant chord would be E, F sharp is the natural 3rd, B is the natural 5, D is a flat 7, and then E again. And that 5, the B natural, is going to be flatted to B flat. So we've got E root, natural 3rd, G sharp. Now flat 5 is B flat, and then D, and I'm playing E again. Or maybe easier heard up here. Oops. E, G sharp, B flat, sorry, E, G sharp, B flat, D, E, B flat, G sharp, E. Pretty cool. Cool sound. The very next chord is going to be an A7, flat 13, sharp 9. The main thing you need to think about is that it is, again, a dominant chord. So we've got F sharp, half diminished, or minor 7, flat 5, F7, E7, A7. That's essentially what we need to look for and pay attention to. Please note, there are many, many different ways that this is notated on paper. This is different than how Wayne Shorter himself wrote it. And I feel okay about going away from what he wrote on himself, because on his very first recording of it, they are not playing exactly what he wrote anyway. So I'm okay going away from it. And I am bringing in what was played on other versions into this, what I'm trying to communicate to you. So knowing that you will see, for example, on that E9 flat 5, people will write like E altered, which that's close, but not quite, because it's a natural 9, not a flat 9 or a sharp 9, which would be in an altered chord. People also write A altered, which could be right I'm saying for that A7, A7 flat 13 sharp 9, could be, you could call that altered, except altered has a flat 5 or a sharp 4. It doesn't have a natural 5. There is a natural 5 in the chord. So those tiny little distinctions are going to make a difference, and you're going to see a bunch of different ways that people wrote this turnaround. In fact, there's everything from what we just talked about to going from just D7 for one bar to D flat 7 for one bar, which is definitely not, absolutely not what was written or played. So this thing of not having the real sort of cut and dry, black and white, what do we play in this part of the song, is the beauty of this music and the great frustration and why this tune is the worst. Because there's no right way to do it, and that's great and terrible all at once. So let me actually belabor the point a little bit, and let's take a look at what exactly Reggie Workman played on his version and what exactly Ron Carter played on his version in this turnaround. So in your PDF, I've included a couple pages with a variety of what these bass players did at that moment only in the tune, in the turnaround. And I want to note here as well, just sort of make a restatement from what's in the title of the video, that this is actually part 1. I want to talk in full about what's happening rhythmically in this section in particular, with Ron Carter in particular, in a video to come, in the next video, talking about footprints. So when I play what they played here in the turnaround, it's not exactly as they played it in time. We're looking at the notes. What was the harmonic intention was my pursuit in when I transcribed this. What did Reggie Workman try to do harmonically here? So the very first one you'll see is F sharp, and then the natural, C natural, so that flat 5, which is remember we're talking about a half diminished chord here. D natural, interesting choice that's the 13 of the F. And then E. Okay, so very clearly, I think he is sticking to these kind of chords we've talked about. F sharp, F7, E7, A7. So F sharp, half diminished, F7, E7, A7. And he doesn't stray really too far from that at all during the bulk of the performance. I mean, I've got 6 samples here. What I did was I extracted just the turnarounds and put them all in one file and transcribed them so that I could really hear them back to back and make sure I got what he was doing. And after 6 iterations of this, I have a pretty clear idea that he's sticking to these chords that we talked about. So let's take a look, for example, at number 5 that Reggie plays here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nothing complicated there. That triplet figure really is just it's just working around that E7 sound. So it's a pretty basic thing, but right at the beginning of this number 5, F sharp, A, C, he's outlining that diminished triad right there, part of that half diminished chord. So it's all sort of very within the expectations of these chords that we're talking about. Number 6, Reggie plays, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you'll see there, this is a little sort of thing happening there where he does play an E flat on the A7. Remember I said that's a natural 5? Well, here in this instance, he's sort of going with a little pattern from that particular bar, E, B, E, E flat, A, da, da. It leads right back to the C. I said A flat, but I meant A natural. So E, B, E, E flat, A, B, C, da. It all sort of works together as a puzzle piece, part of Reggie Workman's genius. So I can say very sort of confidently that I think Reggie was intending to stick with these chords that we've laid out. That's another, at least the spirit or the basic idea of the color of the chords that we've already laid out. That's another idea I feel confident about the chords that I've given you on this particular chart. But when we go to Ron Carter, check out what he does. It's a little bit different. Now, there's a whole bunch of what we call metric modulation in this particular version of footprints that Ron Carter plays on Miles Smiles. And that is in the second video. I want to talk about this metric modulation in the video to come. In this particular set of examples, I've got 5 total here, Ron is playing several different sort of patterns. At least I think that was his intention. And it makes it a little bit sort of gray, right? Amorphous, obtuse. And that makes it a little bit fun, but frustrating. Not a little bit fun, it's a lot of fun, actually. I love actually even being a rule follower. Like, I'm also a reckless player sometimes, and it's a lot of fun to be reckless with respect, which is something a friend recently said to me, like, to play something with respect to the piece, but also be a little reckless with it is so fun. So, and it kind of feels like what Ron is doing here. So in the first example of what Ron plays, he's kind of sticking with, I think, the general idea, but notice he's got a sound here that's kind of like an E flat something, or he's making that A7 the whole bar. I'm not quite sure. These are all eighth notes, by the way, in this particular part. I'll play that one more time. So it sort of feels like he's going F sharp 7, sort of, or F sharp half diminished. He could be doing the half diminished, except he definitely plays the C sharp, not the C, which is the flat 5. So he kind of feels like he's going F sharp 7, F7, E flat 7, E flat 7 flat 5, or A7 flat 5, then the E dominant, then the A dominant. So he's sort of making this descending F sharp, F, E flat, E, A, like that. Is sort of the root of maybe his intention there. So let's look at the third example of what Ron is doing here. And I feel like he is perhaps intending these original things, F sharp, half diminished, or F sharp 7, to F, to E, to A, but I'm not exactly sure. Let's see what he plays here. Again, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and... So this very first sort of half measure, it's really strange. I think he's using this open G to get back down, to get down to the lower register. F sharp, C, open G, D natural, E natural, and now here's the F7, which this all makes sense, except he's playing E natural on an F7. What are you doing, Ron? That's a cool sound though, against the dominant chord happening. F, G, A, E natural, F, G. And now on the E7, I'm not sure what his intention was here. I mean, maybe he's playing a G sharp right here on the downbeat and not an A, although I really heard it as an A. And what I hear is A, B flat, B, then a G sharp. So that would be like encircling the sound of an E7 flat 5. Remember, the E7 flat 5 would be E, G sharp, B flat, sorry, E, G sharp, B flat. And so he's playing, that's really sort of around that same sort of color, isn't it? Even though it's not exactly the right notes, so to speak. And then he plays a D right after that. So that all sort of feels like E7 flat 9, but it's not quite, you know, there. I mean, it's brilliant. It's not like he's screwing around. And yet it's not something I would think of. Again, I am not Ron Carter or in the same universe. Mr. Ron Carter. I should say Mr. Ron Carter. And then on the A7, D, A, natural, E natural, E natural. So again, it's like the earlier example where it sort of feels like he's squishing that E7 flat 9 and A7 together at the end of that bar, as opposed to sort of putting it very clearly like on the downbeat and then on beat 3. I don't think he's thinking like that, for sure. Just one more time with this particular one. So, yeah, what's happening there? I'm not real sure, Ron, but it's pretty great. I do notice on that A7 at the end there, with those open strings, it both sort of settles the moment by allowing, I'm saying for the bass, oh, I just touched my mic, for us as bass players, playing all those open strings sort of settles us in a way. I think, at least mentally, it settles me, and that also makes sense that we're settling back into that that groove, that motif, that ostinato, whatever you want to call that, the main bass line. Now moving on to number 4, we start to get into this area of real metric modulation, where he and Tony Williams and Herbie Hancock on piano are at various times over the course of this performance implying a completely different metric feel, completely different. And it's extraordinarily brilliant and really, really, really clever, and takes a masterful approach, of which he is a master, no question. So number 4, like the idea, remember, we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. And if we were to think about that, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and I can't count like that. But if you think of it as equal dotted quarter notes, you can fill that bar of 6/4 as if it were 4. If you take those dotted quarter notes and think of them as quarter notes and put the right feel to it, put that swing feel to it, suddenly it sounds like you were in a slower 4/4. So he plays one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And as I say, we'll go into this more in the video to come when we talk about these modulations. But what I want to bring attention to there is that he's starting this phrase with like a G sound. Where was a G chord anywhere in anything we talked about? G, D, there's the F sharp, there's the F, there's the E. Why did he get to that A little bit early? I don't know. He's just shifting that harmonic rhythm where appropriate, where it sounds hip as only the maestro can. It's pretty great, and you'll see in the next video to come that there's a lot of other really cool things happening, and I hope I can completely communicate them well because it's amazing thing what he's doing. Nonetheless, let me sort of sum up this fight we've been going through with Ron Carter in particular. I feel like if I'm to think about it in sort of one swath or one brush stroke, it would be that this moment, these two bars of this turnaround contain a very dense palette of colors. And Ron and Herbie, speaking harmonically, Ron Carter and Herbie Hancock are purposefully mixing up those colors and rearranging the primary sort of emphasis of the painting, right? Like if the painting has 20 colors and the main one is red and the second one is blue, whatever, they're sort of switching that around. They're saying, no, the blue now is the main thing, or almost as if you see a negative of a photograph, or you know how pictures work. But right, you're shifting the color balance, and yet the colors remain the same. So if Ron Carter is implying some kind of E flat chord over an A7, an E flat dominant chord in particular over an A7 dominant chord, that's classic tritone substitution, for example. But if he's also playing around with the idea of what these tensions are, remember, for example, we've got an E9 flat 5 in the second part of this turnaround. That E9 would be an E, an F sharp, G sharp, and then a flat 5 is B flat, D, or in sort of succession, E, G sharp, B flat, D, and then the 9 is F sharp. So that F sharp as the tension, as the sound that is happening, as the color that is part of this particular painting of the moment, Mr. Carter is saying, I'm gonna, for example, take this F sharp that is just a color, just a color of the chord, an extension, a cream on top, and I'm going to invert it. And suddenly that is the focus of this particular chord in this particular moment. So one has to have an extraordinary ear, an extraordinary understanding of harmony, an extraordinary command, obviously, of the instrument and of time passing in the moment, right? To be able to actually manipulate all this information, all these colors that are in these pictures, the depth of the choices are available and can be switched at any given time. And that's what I think he's doing. So it's sort of like, rather than going like, when I think about it, and what I'm inviting you to do is to consider that this moment, this turnaround, is rather than a vertical stack starting from F sharp, the F sharp minor 9 flat 5, starting from F sharp and going up like I did, F sharp, A, C, E natural, G sharp, right? Rather than that, it's just like all those notes in there, for example, and there's even more to talk about, but for example, those 5 notes, they all exist at once. Any of them, it's like they're equal. No, the root is irrelevant. What is written as the root is irrelevant. Any of those notes can become the root. Any of those notes can become the third of something. Any of those notes can become the seventh of something. Any of those notes can be the fourth of something. It's like everything is available at once. So writing down that this is an F sharp minor 7 chord is not hitting the mark. And that would explain this approach would explain why there are so many interpretations of this moment, because it's played so many different ways, because everything has equal footing. In the hands of geniuses, you're going to hear that in a lot of different ways. You're going to hear that particular moment, that F sharp minor 9, as something different one time around. And then the next chorus, you might hear him do something different. So that's why it's the worst, guys. It's the worst, because there isn't a clear answer. But it's so great that rather than needing a black and white answer, you get a completely sort of different question, or a completely different way of answering the question. Yeah, no, it's not, there's not a right answer, because the answer is it's everything all at once. And we've talked about this before with Ron Carter, right? So let me encourage you to explore these sounds. Let me encourage you to delve into the argument / discussion / complete confusion about what is happening in this moment in the tune. And I will wish you Godspeed in your pursuit of playing this. When you are playing it live with someone else, and I've mentioned this tune, and I said this in my video about minor blueses, if you're gonna play this with other people, it makes a lot of sense for you to discuss using your words, unless your ears are unbelievable, which is possible, maybe they are. Discuss with who you're playing with, specifically, in particular, the pianist or guitarist, what are you doing on the turnaround? Because not even, everybody doesn't always do this. I mean, like as a standard thing. Oftentimes people will play F sharp half diminished and then B7 instead of that F13 sharp 11, they'll play a B. And then E and then A. It's almost like an extended turnaround. Oftentimes that's a common thing. So know what the folks you're playing with are going to be playing so that you can play it too. And the way to be prepared for that is to study it and understand that there's a lot of things happening in this moment. I have gone on and on about this. I hope that it was interesting for you, and I do hope that you will enjoy sort of studying on your own and exploring all the ways that we can play this very, very frustrating song, which is not the worst, but feels like the worst when you're trying to figure it out. So I hope you'll join me for part 2 in discussing the metric modulations of this turnaround. As always, thanks for joining me, and please like, subscribe. There's a PDF below. And remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.